Hi, and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today we're working on part 4 of my spring mystery quilt for 2024, and it's called Dutchman's Crossing. And part 4 includes all of the outer borders, so I do now have all of the borders on the mystery quilt. For those of you who might be new to my channel, we have been working on this mystery quilt now for 3 weeks. This is part 4. Everything you need, the videos and the PDFs, are out on my YouTube channel, so you'll want to subscribe so that you get notifications for that. Plus, I will leave in the description box below the video here, I'll leave all of the links to the mystery quilt introduction, part 1, 2, 3, etc. And I've also got all of this out on my website, quiltingwithlori.com. There are PDFs that are linked in each of the YouTubes and as well as on my website. And the PDFs will be the instructions. They'll give you the templates if that's required. And for the border for part 4, there definitely are templates. So you definitely want to check below and grab those PDFs, save them to your computer or print them out. And do remember, whenever you print out template PDFs, to print them at 100%. Oftentimes printers do default to fit to page, and you definitely want to make sure that these are 100% when you print them. For those of you that are new to my channel, a little bit of background on this quilt. This mystery quilt is a queen size 90-inch by 90-inch queen size. However, I'm also offering a wall quilt size. So that's something that you'll see as well. There's a PDF below. I'm making the queen size, but some of the students are making the wall quilt size. So check that out below. What I have done is I have gone into my scrap stash and I have found chunks of fabric. In fact, this is my colorway of fabric that you see here and on the wall. I simply wanted to make sure that it followed the colorway of this photo. These photos are in my granddaughter's room, and I'm making this queen size quilt for that room. And so I just wanted to make sure that they worked with these pictures, and they're beautiful. I think it's going to be a beautiful quilt, and it's going to turn out very well. So I'm really excited about it. I hope that you're enjoying making them. There are many of you who have joined along on this mystery quilt, and you're making the queen size. Some of you are doing the wall size. But what I'm going to be doing now, I'm going to take you to the tabletop, and I'm going to show you, first of all, how to do the last 2 borders on this queen size quilt. And then I'm going to share with you how to do the borders on the wall size quilt. And the wall size quilt border is quite similar to what we're doing on the queen size quilt. And you'll see that here in just a few minutes. So let's take a look at some of the supplies that you're going to need. First of all, you're going to want to download the PDF of instructions. There's 5 pages here, so make sure you download that. This is the queen size quilt, this is the wall size quilt, and we're working on all of the borders today. So make sure you download, save that, print it. And then you're also going to need to print out the borders that you're working with. If you're going to do the queen size quilt, these are the border templates you're going to need to print for that. If you're going to be working on the wall size quilt, there are templates that you're going to need to print for that. And there's a few more templates that you'll need to print. And you'll notice here that what I have done is I've had to tape together 2 pages. There's a dashed line that you'll follow, and I've taped it together. So I have the complete triangle that I'm going to need for this project. So those are what you'll need to print out for the wall quilt. Make sure you print them at 100% when you print those. And then for the for the queen size quilt, you'll only be printing a couple of things. This triangle here, this is the end triangle, and that's the reverse. So you'll make sure to print those at 100%, and we'll be tracing those. Now, to trace them, this is the supplies you'll want. I have a roll of some plastic template film. You can buy it in sheets at Hobby Lobby, Joann's, at your favorite quilt shop, online. It's available everywhere, but just get some plastic template sheet, and you can simply lay this over your templates. I never cut my templates from my paper. I leave them intact. The only reason I had to take this one apart is because I needed to tape it as one unit. But I always keep my templates for each pattern stapled together, and I never cut them from the paper so that I'll always have them for future use. And you're simply going to lay your plastic template film over the templates and trace one each of all of the different templates, depending on which quilt you're making, the queen size or the wall size. And you're obviously going to need quite a long template to fit this one right here because it's a very long diamond or triangle, excuse me. I like to use something called a template marking pencil. I've got a couple of these. I've had them for many, many, many years. As you can see, they were $1 when I bought them, probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, and I've used it a number of times, but it works very well on the template plastic. I traced it out. Make sure when you trace your templates that you're tracing on the dotted line. You need your seam allowances for all of these templates because you are piecing this border. So make sure you trace on the dotted line and then cut out your templates. You'll need one of each of them. And you're going to be tracing this template onto the wrong side of the appropriate color fabric. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I do like to use a template marking pencil for tracing. It doesn't rub off on you. Sometimes when you use markers or ink pens and your hand slides across it, it gets all over your hands and then it gets all over your fabric. So let's continue walking down the PDF. We've traced all of our templates now, so they're all traced, they're cut out, and they're ready to be used on the back of our fabric. But before we do that, let's first of all cut out these borders. There are some inside, middle, and outside dark borders, as you can see on the quilt that was on the wall. And here, so this is an inside dark border and a middle dark border and then an outside dark border for the queen size quilt. So you want to make sure that you cut some with the fabric strips or pull from your scrap stash, from your strips, 1.5 inch wide strips. And it tells you exactly how many to cut and how long they need to be. They're all 1.5 inches wide. And these are all that you're going to need for the inside, the middle, and the outside dark borders. So that covers all 3 of these dark borders from here. Now, we're going to work first of all on the rectangle border. And let me give you a close-up of that. And that would be, let me get something to point it out. So that rectangle border is right here. It's this border it's the first, I'm calling it border A, and it's a bunch of rectangles going all the way around the quilt. Let me show you how I put mine together. So I've gotten this a little bit closer for you so you can see it. I recommend printing this PDF out so that you can see exactly what I'm referring to. But that inside, middle, and outside dark border are these 3 borders right there. And now we're going to work on this rectangle border right here that surrounds the center of the quilt. And these are the small 1.5 inch wide dark borders that we just referred to. And now I'm going to show you how I put together this, what I'm calling the rectangle border or border A for the quilt. And on page, I believe it's on page 3. Yes, go to page 3 and you can see where I'm referring to. So we are going to start putting together our top and our bottom rectangle borders, and they're right here. So we're going to start with 2 of the top and the bottom rectangle borders. We're starting with these little pink, in my case, I'm using pink 1.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles on the outside. And then we have 2.5 inch wide by 5 1/8 whites. And then we have greens, pinks, greens, black, green, pink, green. And they are all 9 3/4 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. All of the measurements and the number of units that you need are right in there for border A. So I started mine with the pink. There's the white. This is my green number 1. This is one of my greens. It's more of a beige, but in the photo, they're green. So that's the green. Here is a pink, a green. The black is the center, a rectangle. Green, pink, green, white, and pink. So that is one of the top and bottom borders, and you need to make 2 of them identical and then sew them to the top and the bottom of the quilt. You're going to do the same thing again for the sides of the quilt. It's basically identical. The only difference is that on each end of these borders, you're going to add the white 2.5-inch square. These become the cornerstones. So you need 4 of those. And again, all of the quantities, measurements, colors, etc., that's all in the instructions. But you'll need to add those on the end, and they'll be on each end of the side borders. When you have those completed, then you'll attach those to the sides of the quilt. And then your inside border A is finished. Now we're going to get to the triangle border, which I'm calling border B. And this is all for the queen size quilt. So you'll want to follow along on your instruction sheet. Once you have your top and bottom rectangle borders on, then you're going to add another dark border. This is the middle border. And there again, in my case, they're black. But you'll have another set of those. You're going to be piecing them to the top, the bottom, and the sides. So make sure you do that before you go on to the triangle border. So each one of these borders is offset with a beautiful accent border, which are the black or the dark borders. So now we are going to be working on the triangle borders. For the queen size quilt, you are simply using, let me grab that template here. I had to go searching for the template. So this is the template packet for the queen size quilt. We basically have one, which I'm calling the large triangle, and then we simply have one template that is an end template, and then this is the reverse end template. It finishes off each of those rows so that it squares it up. And in the instructions, it lets you know exactly how many you needed to cut. That was actually on page 2. So on page 2, it lets you know just how many of these triangles and in what value you needed to cut them. So follow those instructions. Then you're going to start laying them out. The top and the bottom border are going to be identical. When you put them on the quilt, you're at least going to flip them. The bottom one is going to be flipped upside down so that the black point is pointing away from the quilt in both cases. But I had traced these templates onto 3.5-inch wide strips of fabric in the lights, and I'm using kind of a creamy white here, in my medium number 1s, and these were my greens, and also in my pinks, and I have a light and a darker pink, and also in a black. So I had 3.5-inch wide strips of fabric with the fabric strips, and I simply placed this on the back of those strips and traced around it. You've got some nice little cutouts there that help you line up your seam allowances on the end there, so make sure that you take advantage of those. But I simply traced it, flipped it, traced it, flipped it, traced it, and continued on down the strip and traced as many triangles as I needed in each of the values. I traced them on the wrong side of those fabrics. So I traced as many as I needed of greens, of pinks, of whites, and of blacks. Let's take a look at these end triangles. I already have this one sewn into this row here, but you can see that it's pointing this way, and here's a reverse one, and it's going to finish out the opposite side of this border to square it off, because these are all triangles, and we need something that squares them off. So that's the purpose of these end triangles. One fits on one side of the border, and the other one will square off the opposite side. So you need one of each for all 4 of the borders. And so you'll be attaching those on all 4 sides. And then when you have finished piecing your top and your bottom and you've sewn those to the quilt, then the last 2 remaining borders, you'll be adding a black 4.5-inch square that will be the cornerstone on each end of these. So you'll want to make sure that you cut 4 of those, because you'll be finishing off the side borders with each of these cornerstones. And so as you can see here, I started on my side borders with a corner, an end piece, a green, a pink, a green and a white, a green and a pink, a green, a white, and there's the black. So that's the middle of the row. I've got a white and a green, and now I need to continue adding my pinks and my greens and my whites as I go across. I'd like to show you now how you can put your triangles together. You want to keep in mind that we have a lot of bias here, and so we're going to need to be very careful about how we sew them together. And there's a trick to doing this, and it's really so very simple. And it helps you to maintain your 1/4 inch. You need your 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top and at the bottom above each of these so that you don't lose your points. You don't want to be losing your points as you sew these into the quilt. So let me show you how that's done. I've tried to get a little bit closer here so you could see this better, but now I need to attach this medium number 2, which is a pink, to this medium number 1, which is a green, and I'll go over how the order in which they're put together here in just a minute. But first, I just want to show you how I'm attaching them. I simply flip them right sides together, and I line up, if you'll notice here, on the end of this, EQ8 has rounded off these ends, which makes it really wonderful for making sure that it gets placed in there properly. So I can go ahead and line that up right along there, and I can line up this end right along here. And then the center of that, because it is all bias, if the top or the bottom are a little bit, if there's more bulk in the top or the bottom, because it's on the bias, it will actually work its way out beautifully. And then when you start sewing, you will start sewing right where that point is. So it kind of comes at a point right there. You're going to start sewing at that point, a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way to the end. And then when you flip it out and fold it up, you will end up having your 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's so important. And that's how I added each and every one of them. I just continued to always add 2 pins. I pinned them first in place. And then no matter if the top or if the bottom seemed a little bulky, they sewed together beautifully. Because of the bias, and the sewing machine was able to feed it through, and the feed dogs were able to feed everything through beautifully, and it turns out quite well. So that's what I would recommend. Put a pin at both ends and just allow the sewing machine and the feed dogs to feed that through beautifully. And then I do finger press everything, and once the whole thing is sewn together, then I go ahead and press it at the iron. But your top and bottom will have all of your triangles with an end triangle on each end. And then you're just going to follow the colors or the values as you work your way across. So here's the top and the bottom, and here are the sides. And then, of course, when you do attach these borders, make sure that the point of the dark triangle is always pointed away from the center of the quilt. Then you'll know that you've attached each border properly. Just always make sure that point on that dark triangle is pointing away from the center of the quilt. So just continue adding the parts and pieces as you need to. For the side triangles, you're going to start out with a square and do the same thing. You'll continue putting your triangles together, but each end of these side triangles will have a 3.5 inch square. And then continue following your pattern. And so at the top of page 4, the last thing you need to do for your queen size quilt is to add the outer dark borders. So again, another strip of 1.5 inch wide dark borders are going to go all the way around the outside of that quilt. Once you have that done, your queen size quilt is ready. It's a 90 by 90 queen size quilt. It's ready to be quilted and bound and labeled. How exciting. Now let's take a look at the wall quilt. The center of your wall quilt was identical to the center of our queen size quilt. And your wall quilt only has one main border and then a black outer border. So you'll want to pull down the 4 different templates from my either my website, quiltingwithlori.com, go to the Mystery Quilt tab and pull them down, or you can find them under the description box here on YouTube. If you're watching YouTube on television, you may not be able to access the description box, so therefore you would want to go out to my website, quiltingwithlori.com, go to the Mystery Quilt tab, and then you can find all of the PDFs that you're going to need. So this one, as I showed you earlier, template A, it's the large template for the wall quilt. It needs to be taped together first, and there's the guidelines here that you'll follow to tape that entire template together and then trace it onto the template plastic. And then we have the diamond template, and we have the B template, and we have the C template. And so all 4 of those are required. I've already cut out the A templates, the very, very large ones. So this one is, I just went to my stash and grabbed some sample strips that I had. So none of this is really, I'm not going to be using this in a quilt. It's just samples for you. I'm using this brown in place of the black. I'm using this gold in place of the pink. And now, so that's the large template A, and it tells you how many strips you need to cut. You can pull your 4.5-inch width of fabric strips either from your stash or your yardage and cut 8 of those pink large A's. And then you'll also need to cut 4 of the large A's in black, as you can see. And then from 2.5-inch width of fabric strips, either from your stash or from yardage, you're going to cut your light triangles, and that's the triangle B. And then from 5-inch width of fabric strips, you're going to cut the 8 medium number 1, the greens, and those are the small triangle C's. And all of this you can follow along on your template. So I would recommend that you pull the template as I'm going through this. And then, of course, the diamonds, you're going to pull from your stash or cut with the fabric strips that are 4.25 inches. And that's what you're going to use to cut out your diamonds. You need 8 of the diamonds, and they're the end triangles, actually, for the wall quilt. So this is the wall quilt. This is the queen size quilt. The wall quilt has 4 different templates that we're using. These are the cutting instructions, as well as the corner squares and the outside borders. So make note of that. You're going to cut everything first, and then you're going to start piecing the borders. So now let's go to page 5 here. And this is what we'll start piecing. You're going to do the top and the bottom border, and then you're going to do the side borders. And the only difference between them is adding those pink squares on each end. Now I want to take you through how you can easily cut this and sew all of these templates together. My triangle A's are done, so I've got those cut and they're off to the side. Triangle B's are basically identical to this, they're just smaller. And so I've got my 2.5-inch wide pieces of fabric, and I'm simply going to place those on that fabric, and you're going to trace, take a pen or a pencil, and you're simply going to trace around the template on the wrong side of that piece of fabric, and then you can flip and trace again. Now this piece isn't long enough for me to trace a second one, but if you had a width of fabric strip, you could certainly just continue flipping and tracing till you had as many of those B templates as you needed. So go ahead and do that, get those prepared. Then for the C templates, what I have here is I guess this is well, yeah, there is a wrong side to this. I wasn't sure if there would be or not. And what I'm going to do, I've got the wrong side facing me. I am going to lay this on here. So this is a 5-inch width of fabric strip here. I'm laying the C template like this, and I can trace all the way around this C template. And because I have it double folded there, I'm actually tracing 2 at one time, and you can cut that out. So that's how you can trace and cut your C's. And then, of course, you can just flip, line it up on this line here that you've already drawn and on the bottom there, and trace the other side and just continue flipping and tracing and then cut them out. I would recommend using a ruler to actually cut along here, because if you cut along the plastic, it's very easy to cut into the plastic, and then you're going to be distorting your template. So I use a ruler, so then you can cut all of your C templates that way. And then we have our diamonds, and this is a rhombus basically. So let me flip it inside out. So I have a width of fabric strip here. And what I'm going to do is lay that rhombus just like that. I'm going to make sure it's not in the selvage there. And you can see that the two sides here line up beautifully on this 4 1/4 inch width of fabric strip. And I will simply go ahead and trace. And then I can use this and cut it out. And you can simply just keep lining that up and cutting and tracing and cutting out more. So you can cut out as many as you need. And that's how you would cut out the diamond shapes. And now I'm going to go ahead and get those cut off camera, and then I'm going to show you how to piece that together. So I have laid out the beginning of the row, and I've started with the C template here on the end, and it's facing in, and that squares off the row itself there. Then I have the pink right here, which I'm using yellow, and this is the black, and I'm using brown. So these are the large A templates here. And then in here, we have one of those diamonds. That's the rhombus. And so that sits right there. And up here, we have the 3 B templates. So what you're going to do when you sew this together, you're going to piece it in units. So the first thing you're going to do is piece these two together, and then it will get pieced to this large template here. You'll piece these two together, and then this can be pieced as a unit. And you can also actually piece this one. We'll probably piece all 3 of these, and then it can go with that, and then it can go with that. It's really simple to put together. You just have to do it in units. So the first thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this end, this C template. I'm going to flip it upside down and lay it on this. And again, I'm going to use 2 pins, one at each end, and I'm going to start sewing from, I don't think it's laying there properly, but I'm going to start sewing from that point to that point, 1/4 inch. I'm going to do that, and I'll bring it back to the tabletop so you can see that. All right, I have this unit sewn together, and I've flipped it open and finger pressed it. So it is ready now for me to add this unit to triangle A here, which in the picture it's pink. For mine it's like a gold here. So I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to add it to this. I'm going to pin it with 2 pins again. I'll probably put 3 pins in there because it's long enough that it needs it. And then I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from point to point here. I will do that and bring it right back to the tabletop. So I've just finished sewing it here, and now I'm going to flip it open. I'll finger press it. And so now this whole section has been sewn. And now I'm going to sew this unit, these 3 pieces here, the 2 little B templates with the diamond, and then it will get attached to this A, the other side of the pink A here, and in my case it's gold. Let me get these sewn, and what I'll do here is first of all flip this one upside down. I will pin it here and here. I will sew 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I will flip it open so that it will be done. Then I will do the same thing with this side. I will add it here, pin it, 1/4 inch seam allowance, flip it open, and then this will become one big triangle. Actually, this will be the same size as this A triangle here. So let me get this sewn here first, this sewn here second. I'll finger press it, and then we'll attach it to this one right here. So this unit is ready here, and I have now sewn this B triangle to the diamond or the rhombus here. And now I can sew this B triangle by just simply flipping it over, right sides together, and I'll pin and sew 1/4 inch from here to here. I'll do that, bring it back, and you'll see that I'll have what's really the shape of another A template, which is these large ones here, and I'll be able to piece this one to that. I'll show you in a minute. So I finished piecing these 2 A or B templates to the diamond or the rhombus. And now we have another large A triangle. And I should have grabbed some sample fabrics that were not all the same color. It's kind of hard to see all of this, but these triangles here, the B's, would actually be the white triangles in the photograph of the wall quilt. This rhombus or diamond would be the green fabric in the photograph, and this over here would also be the green in the photograph. And then this is the pink large triangle A, and this would be the large black triangle A. And so you can see that by putting two of these smaller B's with the diamond or the rhombus, we have actually created a large A. It's the same size. So now what we can do with this is simply flip it together, right sides together, and again, pin on each end, and I'll definitely pin in the center. So a 1/4 inch seam allowance from point to point, and then I'll finger press, and you can certainly go to your iron and press these after each step. I am simply finger pressing for the purposes of the video here. But I'm going to go ahead and put that on, and then I'm going to put the center B, which is this black, or in my case it's brown. I will place that one on there and sew it together. And then we're halfway across the border for the wall quilt, and you're going to do the very same thing on the other side. You're going to be piecing these as a unit, and you'll piece these to this one on the other side of the border, and then you'll have one complete border, which you'll use for top and bottom. The only difference between the top and the bottom borders on the wall quilt, same as for the queen size quilt, are those squares that are on the end of the quilt. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. All right, so I have the border finished from this point. I started at the end. This is triangle B, triangle A, and this would be pink in the picture. Triangle B, here is the diamond, which would be green in the picture. Triangle A, or B, excuse me. And then this would be the black triangle A in the photograph. So we'll go ahead and sew that on again by just flipping it right sides together, putting it on there, and then sewing it, 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then the only difference between the top and bottom borders and your side borders, again, would be the fact that you're adding the 4.5 inch squares on each end of these borders. And you're going to have 4 of these. And on the last 2 borders that you make, you're going to be sewing these 4.5 inch squares on each end, and that will finish off the side rows. But you're simply going to sew each of the borders together using this format. You're going to sew these 2 pieces together. You'll attach it with the triangle A. You'll sew these 3 pieces together, and you'll then sew it to triangle A, and then you can sew this triangle A to this, and just continue across the border until you have the 4 borders done. And then just, of course, add the 4.5 inch squares to the side borders. So everything I've just shared with you is, of course, right here in the description. It talks to you about the top and bottom border and then the side borders, and the only difference, of course, is those squares on the end that I had just mentioned. The last thing that you'll want to do is add your black outer borders, and they're just 1.5 inches wide again, and you're going to cut 4 of them at the 62.5 inch length, but you're also going to cut some 1.5 inch corner squares out there for the corner, and you can cut them in any color you want, actually. It could be the light, or it could be the green, or it could be the pink, whatever you choose. But you'll attach these 1.5 inch borders to the top and the bottom, and then you'll take the last 2 and you'll attach those tiny little cornerstones to each end, and then you'll attach the sides, and you're done. The wall quilt is ready, and if you're doing the queen size quilt, you've got that one ready. Let's go ahead and get them quilted, and I can't wait to see pictures from all of you that are working on this quilt. I hope you'll share those on my Facebook page and share them with me as well. Thank you so much for joining me as we have worked through this Dutchman's Crossing, which is my spring 2024 mystery quilt. Here you can see the top half of it. I've got the 90 inch quilt on the wall there. It's quite large. And I'm so excited to have it ready, and I can't wait to get it quilted. I am looking forward to seeing pictures of yours. I hope that you'll all send me photos so that I can include them in a YouTube video of all of the quilts that my students have created. I would like to have those photos from each of you by May 15. The quilt doesn't have to be quilted at that time. If you could just have it pieced so that we can see it, and send me a photo of that. And I would need your name and your city and state and country in which you live, and I'd like to include that in a YouTube video. So thank you so much for doing that. I hope you've enjoyed the videos. Thanks so much for joining me. And until next time, happy quilting.